Hard Truths by EpicCoolGuy923. Table of Contents. Part 1. Prologue. Part 2. Fairbanks. Part 3. Birth of New Orleans. Part 4. Early Days. Part 5. First Rollback. Part 6. Renaissance. Part 7. Server Slump. Part 8. Louisiana. Part 9. New Phoenicia. Part 10. The Casts. Part 11. Staff 1. Part 12. The Beach. Part 13. The Tower. Part 14. Staff 2. Part 15. Tower Theft. Part 16. Sorzies. Part 17. The Purge. Part 18. The Reset. Part 19. UEA. Part 20. The Museum. Part 21. Staff 3. Part 22. Staff Abuse. Part 23. High Tensions. Part 24. War. Part 25. Game Over. Part 26. Epilogue. Part 1. Prologue. Like many of you, I joined FlatMC because of the ever-so-popular SMP Earth. However, FlatMC was actually the third or fourth Earth server that I tried out. Upon joining several months back, I felt like I had found a really laid-back and chill server. How wrong I was. Over the coming months, I would learn just how drama-filled FlatMC was and how some of the staff were corrupt with power. Everything recounted in this book is told as accurately as possible. Part 2. Fairbanks. Upon my arrival, I was graciously invited to join the town of Fairbanks, a small town nestled amongst the Alaskan wilderness. Through Fairbanks, I acquired the basic necessities to venture across North America. Part 3. The Birth of New Orleans. Following my short stint with Fairbanks, I headed east, traveling across the snowy terrain until I'd moved far enough east to hit the boundary waters. My travels then led me south to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. Using my newly acquired boat, I traveled south along the river, eventually finding myself at the river's delta, a perfect place to settle. New Orleans was born. With funding from the KSSR, I was able to get New Orleans on its feet, slowly terraforming the land into a large port city. While the KSSR didn't last, New Orleans would go on to be the capital of a powerful nation. Part 4. Early Days. The town of New Orleans was built heavily upon its original members, Cloud Corpse and Bisexual Rocket, members whom contributed to the original City Hall and several other long-standing creations. With their only neighbor being Titusville to the east, it left plenty of room for the new city to expand. Part 5. First Rollback. In my infancy on the server, early boom, the server was rather stable, the lag was negligible, and many tried to keep the peace. As the server grew in size, mid-boom, so did the instability. Everyone from that point in time remembers the first rollback. It was the first of many that were issued to fix issues from the constantly crashing plugins. The first red flag, as you will, to the incompetence of the server owner Matthew, the King PE's ability to run a fun and stable server. Part 6. Renaissance. As the days moved on, construction of New Orleans slowed, Cloud Corps became inactive, and the town was struggling to bring in new members. If it wasn't for the arrival of Sabs 18 and his craftsmanship, the city might have fallen out of the picture entirely. New Orleans was renovated under Sabs. A hotel, market, and farmhouse were some of the many projects that were undertaken during his reign as head builder of New Orleans. Many more had been planned for the future development, including a church, shopping mall, and grain silo. Part 7. Server Slump. The Renaissance period of New Orleans came to a conclusion with the server slump, a week-longish period where the server was closed in a failed attempt to migrate over to external hosting. Players like Sabs 18 never returned to the server, unaware, without a Discord account, why the server was closed, and abandoned it entirely. The server slump also marked the end of the server's rapid growth, leaving only the dedicated to return. Part 8. Louisiana. Following the server slump, the nation of Louisiana was formed after a brief stint in Titusville's version of the United States. With this newly founded nation, New Orleans was able to bring together towns from across the world. Part 9. New Phoenicia. The first major town to join Louisiana came from the original New York, called New Phoenicia, led by Johnny 13. New Phoenicia was an Arabian coastal town looking for a new nation to help them. Part 10. The Casts. Following land claims too close to New Orleans made by the Botswana Empire and the Cyprus Empire, New Orleans built several lava walls against them. While the walls didn't last, it began a new age for Louisiana, the political age. Part 11. Staff 1. As I grew on the server, an opportunity opened up to potentially become staff. While I did not think much of my rejected application at the time, it would be the first of several times I was passed over or ignored. Part 12. The Beach. The first major project undertaken since the departure of SABS 18 was the beach. It spanned the entirety of New Orleans and added vast amounts of flat terrain to build upon. Myself and Johnny 13 led the operation, which took several long days to complete. Part 13, the Tower. The second major building project undertaken post-Renaissance was the Bluesiden Tower, a tower that stood 256 blocks tall and took up an entire chunk at spawn. The tower was built to sell everything available in Minecraft. Due to unforeseen corruption issues, the tower was never completed. In an attempt to fix the data corruption, the shop underwent a massive renovation, which increased the shop's total size by 400%. Despite this attempt to salvage the tower, the project became too overwhelming and was put on hold indefinitely. Part 14, Staff 2. Several weeks after the initial influx of staff members, new spots were opening up. However, after sending in my application, I was ghosted by the King PE, never getting a response for my bid for staff. Instead, players like OK223, the EnderKing76, and Dorkfish49 were promoted out of the blue days later, without any formal introduction. Part 15, Tower Theft. As construction on the tower rapidly grew, an unexpected break-in occurred. A quick investigation led to Super Mousy 2222 being found in possession of the stolen items. Despite his claim of innocence, this began a period of conservatism for Louisiana, an effort to protect the nation from its potential enemies. Part 16, Sorzies. Sorzies, the most controversial yet productive staff member on the server, controversial due to his ties with rival server Tubal 1.15.1, the King PE, and several other active members, mostly staff, believe Sorzies to be a traitor to FlatMC. Despite Sorzies' attempts to help both servers grow and flourish, this all boiled into a fierce trial that was flawed and unjust. The voting period was dragged on until the voting reflected that Sorzies would be demoted. In attempts to correct their mistake, they extended the voting time, once again finding Sorzies innocent of all crimes. However, for a second time, the voting was allowed to drag on unfairly. Only after occurring for a third time in a row was Sorzies finally acquitted of the charges against him, setting a trend of unfairness and biases towards certain players. Part 17, The Purge. The single biggest event that occurred on the server up until the Great War was The Purge, dubbed for the insane amount of towns and nations that were toppled due to townie deletion being enabled, Louisiana taking the biggest hit. Losing all its members and towns to The Purge, including the active ones, reconstruction would begin with The Reset. Part 18, The Reset. New Orleans made swift land claims in the days and weeks leading up to The Purge, going so far as to claim large portions of the Gulf of Mexico. Following The Purge, we felt we no longer needed the Gulf of Mexico. A time-saving measure to quickly and effectively purge the Gulf of Mexico claims was to reset Louisiana, leading to a temporary deletion of New Orleans and Louisiana. The reset officially marked the beginning of the end for the once prosperous town and nation. Part 19, UEA. United East Asia was Louisiana's first true enemy. We saw the UEA as a parasite that threatened the stability of the server with their warmongering ways, even breaking down the remains of the Japanese Empire, our biggest ally. Though in fairness, they have the potential to be a decent group of people when they are not always causing drama. Part 20, The Museum. Following The Purge, myself and Johnny 13 began a quest to loot as many fallen towns as we possibly could. We raided Kiev, Belgium, Constantinople, London, Falkreath, Saskatchewan, and Cincinnati, along with many other unnamed or non-important bases, acquiring everything from flags to books and various rare artifacts, compiling what we acquired into a museum that would be featured prominently at our shop. Part 21, Staff 3. Probably my single biggest grievance against the server, my third and final attempt to become a staff member. Pieced together from several conversations I had with various staff members and the King PE, I learned why I was snubbed for admin. Just 2 days after Sorzi's trial, the King PE announced that one admin spot was opening up, and the following night was going to be taking applications until the following night. However, this was not the case. Roughly a half hour later, Quasi was promoted to admin. I lied. We got so many applications today, so I've ended the voting. Congratulations to Quasi for winning the vote unanimously. He did not get so many applications, and the voting was not unanimously. As I had come to learn, there was only 3 other applications besides mine and Quasi's submitted in the 30 to 45 minutes since the window opened. Hardly worthy of so many. In addition, I learned that only one admin voted for Quasi. Dorkfish49, stepping in to vouch for 2Quasi because they are real-life friends, using the cover of Quasi's previous experience as the server admin elsewhere to justify his promotion. While in fact it was Matt's virtual friendship with Dorkfish49 that led to Quasi getting the promotion over more reasonable applicants such as myself, leading me to assume that unless I became buddies with Matthew, I will keep being snubbed for admin. While 2Quasi has done a fair job as an admin so far, even returned some confiscated items to me, the way in which he was promoted was less than fair. It was clearly biased. Part 22. Staff Abuses. It was around this time that the admins started to really abuse their powers, starting with a small but also significant dirty event, an event in which Dylan Plays MC was given a free inventory full of dirt by an admin. The event holds significance in the larger picture because it shows that the admins march to the beat of their own drums. There is little consistency amongst them. Each admin makes up what is reasonable and what is not, as well as what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do. It was also around this time that the admins started creating a collection of powerful weapons and armor that made them virtually untouchable. But instead of keeping the weapons and gear to themselves, they began to use them against other non-admin players, even in some cases allowing players to obtain these overpowered items for themselves. The King PE, owner of the server, did nothing to stop the admins, instead joined in by making/using overpowered gear he has created. But while this was occurring, admins like the EnderKing76 were confiscating overpowered items from people like myself and Johnny13, despite us having obtained these items legitimately. The admin abuse only got worse when Gix decided to copy our idea for a museum, with all the admins drooling over his project and giving him everything he needed for his museum, going so far as to copy every single item from our own museum, including the exclusive katana and Sorcy's Tears. Despite Gix's explanation that he wasn't rivaling our museum, it seems that the admins and Matt had a different plan, even creating new illegal items for him, such as the plague arrow, boiling over with Matthew, the King PE, declaring the copycat museum built by Gix, heavily aided by the admins, to be the official one. Part 23. High Tensions. Following a failed attempt to unify nations under the Global Alliance of Powers, GAP, collapse of the Japanese Empire, and the rise of the United East Asia, UEA, the King PE began his push to unify the entirety of the United States under the USA nation, insisting that I dissolve Louisiana and join up with him and the rest of the USA. Taking into account everything that had happened during my time so far on the server, there was no way I was going to join up with a nation I considered to be the enemy, going so far as to make my demands clear. 100,000 gold or I wouldn't join their nation. Fully aware that they would never pay this amount of gold, it was merely an "I'm not joining you, so stop trying to get me to join" offer. However, the King PE and others took a great deal of hostility towards my disinterest to join the USA. "We will burn New Orleans to the ground like we did Atlanta," Zrex20. "If you don't join USA, you're gonna get by USA and UEA, Gix. Let's just claim Black Lesbiana," the King PE. Ultimately, the King PE acted upon his threat, completely preventing us from expanding any further. Part 24. War. My decision to declare war against the USA was entirely my own. I knew full well that I was going to lose Louisiana and possibly New Orleans, whether I liked it or not. Despite this, I was holding firm in my desire to remain free of USA rule. My only goal of the war was to slay the King PE at all costs, which I successfully did, turning the tables on the King PE, using the everything level 127 enchanted gunpowder returned to me earlier on by 2Quasi. It was a conflict between me and the King PE. The rest of the USA and UEA had no reason to get involved. I initiated the war as a direct response to him claim blocking my town. The war exploded over nothing, people quickly targeting Johnny, who was largely unequipped to defend himself. The warmongering UEA going as far as killing Johnny nonstop, preventing him from getting his stuff back, and then killing all of his villagers. But the worst thing to come out of the war was the deliberate admin abuse by Dorkfish49, using his admin powers to force teleport me at him in a series of failed attempts to kill me. Every opportunity they gave me and Johnny to surrender, we refused. Although the war is now over, I never surrendered, even though Johnny eventually grew tired of the useless conflict. Part 25. Game over. I knew my time in Louisiana and New Orleans was rapidly coming to an end. I knew that in less than a day my town would be deleted per the direction the talks were headed. I knew that in order to keep New Orleans out of the hands of the USA, I would have no choice but to grief it. So grief it I did. After disbanding Louisiana and joining the Holy Roman Empire for my final hours as mayor of the city, I blew it to smithereens, thus concluding my time on FlatMC. Part 26. Epilogue. The details recounted in this autobiography are all approximate. I tried to be as accurate as possible. However, not everything featured is elaborated upon in the greatest of detail. Also, not all events are recounted here. I only included what was relevant to the overarching story. My grievances are largely directed towards Matthew, the King PE, and how he, in my opinion, poorly manages the server. He fails to keep the admins in check and fails to address the server's growing performance issues. I have nothing against Tuquazi, but rather how new admins are appointed. Since the war, I have moved over to Tuble.online, where I help Sorzies grow the server as an admin. Planning to return to FlatMC on occasion to assist Johnny and Rocket in their own endeavors. As Abraham Lincoln once said, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. I had a good run here, but I finally game overed. Farewell, EpicCoolGuy923. Timeline, 2019 to 2020. EpicCoolGuy joined Fairbanks. EpicCoolGuy923 left Fairbanks. EpicCoolGuy923 sailed down the Mississippi River. The town of New Orleans was formed with funding by the KSSR. Cloud Corpse and Bisexual Rocket joined New Orleans. Sabs18 joined New Orleans. New Orleans enters the Renaissance. Server slump happens. Louisiana is formed. New Phoenicia joins Louisiana. The casts are formed. The beach is created. Blue Zidon Tower is constructed. The tower is robbed. A trial against Sorzies is held. The purge occurs. The reset occurs. United East Asia forms. The museum is built. The museum is copied. Admins ramp up abuse. Tensions rise. Louisiana vs. USA war. New Orleans is blown up. EpicCoolGuy923 leaves the server. Tuble info. Tuble.online 1.15.1. Discord https://discord.gg/db9bptp. Live map Tuble.online 8123. This autobiography is dedicated to Bisexual Rocket, Johnny 13, and Sabs 18. For without them, New Orleans and Louisiana would never have been the same. Copyrighted 2020, published by EpicCoolGuy923, copied by Tuquazi, distributed by New Phoenicia.